Hi, I'm Becca.
And I'm Ryan.
And we are Team Fuel.
And this is Fuel Up. So today we're going to talk about two common movement patterns that we see a lot of confusion with our clients and in our exercise classes. And that's the squat versus the hinge. We want to talk about the differences between these two movements. They're both great movements with a lot of benefits. We're just going to talk about how they differ. So the first exercise we're going to demonstrate is a goblet squat. This is a more quad dominant exercise than a hinge. And notice as she comes down and back up, okay, her primary movement here is vertical, up and down. Her torso stays upright. A lot of glute activation, but a lot of quad activation as well. Our second movement is going to be just a regular old reverse lunge. You could do this weighted or unweighted, it doesn't really matter. And this is a single leg exercises, which is one of the main benefits of it. But again, notice that most of the movement is coming around her knee joint, and this is still quadricep dominant and glute dominant. Now we're going to compare these, and this is where most of the confusion starts, with the hinge pattern. A hinge is essentially a bend. We're using the hips as the breaking point. That is our point of rotation as she comes down. And notice in the hinge, her back is nice and neutral and flat. That's important as we get into weighted exercises. And also take a look at her neck. Becca is looking down at the floor as she hinges, as opposed to looking up in the cervical spine, which will give you that kind of extension there that we don't want to see. So this exercise tends to still involve the glutes, but a lot more hamstring activation than quad activation when compared to a squat. Our second movement is one that there's a lot of confusion around, and that's a kettlebell swing. So this is also a hinge pattern, but it involves some momentum. So to somebody looking at this might look like Becca's using her back to swing this kettlebell up. She's actually not. Most of the activation is coming from her hamstrings and her butt is what's pushing this through. So a lot of leg activation as she snaps her hips through, and notice she keeps her spine neutral. Again, just like the deadlift.
I wonder, Ryan, if we should demonstrate what we often see in class or with our clients.
Absolutely. So I would say two of the biggest mistakes I see. The first is squatting the deadlift. So this again is not a squat pattern. Notice how she's bending at the knee, more quadricep dominant. What we're trying to work with the kettlebell swing is more hamstring, just like that. A little more hinge pattern as opposed to a squat pattern. The second problem we see with swings is breaking, especially in the thoracic spine. So what we're going to see is a rounding of the spine as she comes down. Notice the rounding. That's not what we want to see. We want to stay nice and neutral. And lastly, something we do see is breaking that neutral plane of motion with the hips. See how she's bringing her hips through, extending? And now that is something people do with good intentions because they're trying to use their hips as opposed to their knees, but we want to stop at that neutral position.
I think I see that often even in class when people are doing the stiff leg deadlift and they come here.
Correct. All you need to get to is neutral so that your hips come up. We stop right here. There's no need to go any further, extending those hips into the frontal plane. Well, Becca, I hope that people understand the difference between a squat and a hinge a little better.
And if not, they should ask.
Well, thanks for joining us today on Fuel Up. We look forward to seeing you next time.